reading of Allama Iqbal's reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. And basically, we covered his discussion of Ouspensky's conception of space and time last time. And basically, he started with the notion of space-time in classical physics, and he moved on to, and he saw problems with the conception of space and time in classical physics because it is mechanistic. It doesn't provide any room for creativity, which he is looking for. So the motion, creativity, and time are closely connected in Allama Iqbal. In Einstein, he saw something which goes beyond classical physics, because for him, Einstein basically deconstruct and delegitimizes the classical concept of substance, which was, for Allama Iqbal, is the foundation of materialism, which is also trying to reject. But he didn't find everything he was looking for in Einstein's conception of space-time, because for him, Einstein merges time into space, and which for Allama Iqbal is not a positive move, because if we understand time in the image of space, then we divest time of its creative resourcefulness. So then he looks at Ouspensky's conception of space and time, and he finds something which in Ouspensky which gives him a hope beyond Einstein. So with Einstein, subjective experience or subjective aspect of time was missing as well. And in a way, time cannot be understood or cannot be fully understood without bringing in the subjective element, or at least explaining it. So what was the positive he found in Ouspensky, which goes beyond Einstein? The positive he did find, so he found in Ouspensky, as we saw yesterday, or the last time, that he saw in Ouspensky's conception of time, or his definition of time, as a distance. Ouspensky defines time as a distance. But that's not a good start, because distance is a spatial concept, but it seemed that, at least at the start, that this use of distance is more metaphorical. So time as a distance separating events. That was his definition, separating events in order of succession and binding them. I think last time we didn't emphasize enough the importance of binding them in different wholes. That's important too. So let's look at this definition today. But that will give us an idea of what is attractive in Iqbal, what is attractive in Ouspensky for Iqbal. But then, as we saw, in the end, he finds Ouspensky also lacking, in the sense that his conception seems also to reduce time to space, or at least albeit at a higher level. But we will come to that. But let's first see what's the positive in it. The first element of this definition is distance separating events in order of succession. Now, this in a way captures sequential nature of time. Sequential nature of time. And by sequential nature of time, what we mean is simply that events occur one after another. So that sequence is unique in time, because unique for time, because space is a distance, time is a distance, and both have distances separating events. But the difference is that time is sequential in nature, so events occur one after another. But in space, in the concept of space, you don't have that sequential element, and you can bring in sequential elements in a spatial discourse only because you're using the concept of time. Okay, so in a way, yeah. So that's one thing. So this is a chronological aspect of time, which is important or essential for understanding cause and effect, for example. And in a way, it is a defining characteristics of time. Because if you define both space and time as distance separating events, then what differentiates time from space is this chronological order, this sequential order. Okay. But the second thing is, in this definition, which we didn't spend much time on here last time, was the binding element of time. That time binds. Time binds different events in different wholes. So events in my day, for example. So time has bound those events into one whole because they belong to my day. And this, in a way, introduces a subjective element. In this definition of time, which Iqbal was obviously looking for, the definition of time. Okay, so far it is good. So, for different events in my life. So in that way, death is, as Heidegger would say, death is very important for our conception of time, isn't it? So death, in a way, is the end of possibilities within that subjective experience. So binding time in different wholes. So that's, as I said, introduces the subjective elements. The time is not just a simple line. It is a line as well, as the first part of definition makes it clear. But more than that, it is a framework that connects events into a meaningful structure or whole. Even if you don't use the word meaningful, you can say connects them into into a structure or a whole. That can be, as I said, subjective, related to my life, so a lifespan of a person. But it can also be social, at the social level, so history of a society, for example, or history of civilization, or history of universe, etc. So this aspect, the binding aspect, points to a conception of time which is important for the perception of the creation of and structuring reality through lens of time, through creating narratives, histories, and causal relationship. So, in a way, it seems to be a very promising start. So, where does things go wrong? And that Alan Iqbal comes to at the end part. And the problem comes here when Alan Iqbal so he says, Ouspensky, elsewhere in the same book, Ouspensky describes our time sense as a misty sense, space sense, and argues that Ouspensky describes our time sense as a misty space sense, and argues on the basis of our psychic constitution that to one, two, or three dimensional beings, the higher dimension must always appear as a succession of time. So from this, what we gather is that, in a way, this sense of time is not real. This sense of time is the byproduct of the limitations of our constitution. And because we cannot understand reality at all levels or at once, we always seem to understand the dimension which is beyond our comprehension as time. So a creature whose sense of space dimension is just one sense or one dimension sees second dimension as time, and a creature with two dimension space perception sees the third dimension as time, and creatures like us who has three dimensional space conception sees the fourth dimension as time. So what looks as creative, as meaningful, is in effect just the byproduct of our limitation. And if we could see all the dimensions at once, then everything is spatial. There's no time as such. So at the end, there is no time. If there is no time, time is reduced into space, then everything is as it is. It can't be otherwise. So creativity is gone. That's Alan Iqbal's point. So even though he finds Ouspensky promising at the start, that promise, like Einstein's promise, slowly fades away when we look at the ultimate explanation. So that's what he's saying. Elsewhere in the same book, Ouspensky describes our time sense as a mystery space sense. On the basis of our psychic constitution that to one, two, or three dimensional beings, the higher dimension must always appear as succession in time. This obviously means that what appears to us three-dimensional being as time is in reality an imperfectly sensed space dimension, which in its own nature does not differ from the perfectly sensed dimension of Euclidean. In other words, time is not a genuine creative movement, and what we call future events are not fresh happenings, because if everything is spatial, then everything is determined in Alan Iqbal's view. But things already given and located in unknown space, which we see that unknown space we experience as time. Yet in his search for a fresh direction other than the three Euclidean dimensions, Ouspensky needs a real serial time. That is a distance separating event in order of test time, which was needed and consequently viewed as succession for the purposes of one stage of argument is quietly divested at a later stage of its serial character and reduced to what does not differ in anything from the other lines and dimensions. So that's where the whole project falls apart. From Alan Iqbal's perspective, might not fall apart from Ouspensky's perspective. We might not be looking for what Alan Iqbal is looking for. Because of this serial character of time, that Ouspensky was able to regard it as a generally a new direction in space. If this character is in reality an illusion, how can it fulfill Ouspensky's requirement of an original dimension? It may or may not, but the point is it doesn't fulfill Alan Iqbal's conception or Alan Iqbal's requirement. Ouspensky believes that our consciousness is structured in such a way that it can only perceive three spatial dimensions clearly. That's his argument. So any other dimensions which we don't perceive clearly, for example, fourth dimension, we perceive it as time. But in fact, it is just the byproduct of our misty sense. It's not reality. So time is in fact space. If we were fourth-dimensional beings, we would experience time as just another dimension of space. That's his argument. The fourth and higher dimensions are beyond our immediate sensory grasp, and so our minds translate them into a form we can understand, and that form is flow of time. But flow of time is actually an illusion, which is a byproduct of our limitations. Okay, but that is unacceptable for Allama Iqbal. For him, flow of time. That's why he will ultimately go to Bergson. This suggests that past, present, and future may not be distinct or sequential reality, but rather coexisting part of a larger spatial whole. Yeah, larger spatial whole that we simply cannot perceive all at once. So this view basically challenges time, conventional view of time as a fundamental, and that's what Allama Iqbal is looking for: linear progression, and instead reframed as a byproduct of our perceptual limitation. In Ouspensky's world, all of existence is eternal and simultaneous. All existence is eternal and simultaneous. It doesn't. So everything is written. But for Allama Iqbal, this is the death of creativity. But for Ouspensky, our experience, change, and success is merely a subjective filter on that underlying reality which is already there. But for Allama Iqbal, reality is being created every time, kun fayakun, as he says. As he says in his poetry, the sound of kun fayakun he can hear. So I think this was a fruitful session in the sense that we have much clearer grasp on Allama Iqbal's attraction to and then his rejection of Ouspensky. Okay. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk wa salli wa sallim ala sayyidina wa maulana wa habibina wa shafiina Muhammad wa barik wa salli alayhi. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Amin.